Good afternoon, Mike Eklund. Welcome to the Cobb Cast.
Hey Dan, how are you? Good to see you again.
I'm doing great. This is a bit of a celebration for me. So I actually cracked open a
Oh,
bottle of wine. I've
that's a
been
good
so
idea.
looking forward to having this conversation. So I'm celebrating, it's good. A
Nice.
good cab. It's 4:30 here though, so I don't feel bad. If it were
Yeah.
noon, I might, although I am in Florida.
Right.
So you are in West Dundee, Illinois. What's the temperature there right now?
It's a wicked like 10 degrees today. Yeah.
Holy crud. Wow, that is
Yeah.
cool. And I'm sure
It's been
that's not included the wind chill.
right. The wind chills have been pretty bad, like negative temperatures the last week or so. Yeah.
Yeah, not good. It's actually been kind of chilly here the last couple of days, like 64. I
Oh
know
yeah.
that sounds, but normally it's like in the mid 70s. I think we had 83, 84 the other day. So this
Hmm.
is a great conversation I've been looking forward to because I've known you for over 20 years, I think. And you're a guy I thoroughly respect on so many different levels. I mean, today we're going to be talking a lot about your art, your craft of music, and everything. But it's just a person. I feel really blessed to have known you all of these years. So this
Oh,
is going to be
thank you.
fun for me.
Likewise.
So just to kind of level set. So we're going to get into a lot of stuff, but Mike, you're a singer, a songwriter, a musician. You can play multiple instruments. You do some producing. You're also a
Hmm.
deep, and I don't know if you view yourself this way on this other stuff I'm going to say, but from my own personal observations and our relationship over the years, you're also a deep thinker. And I remember quite a bit of deep conversations we've had. You've got an
Hmm.
entrepreneurial spirit, and I want to get into some of that stuff. And I got to turn off my phone. That's a
That's a good
first.
idea.
Yeah. Um, I just remember quite a bit of time that we used to spend just talking about different ideas. And it's funny because some of the things we talked about actually came to fruition, but not by us.
Yeah.
So, but let's level set. So we met back in, I want to say it was my 20s. I'm 54. How old are you?
52. I'll be 53 next month.
Okay, so I'll be 55 in June. So yeah, there's
Yeah.
a few. Yeah, I'm a little bit older than you. I'm pretty sure it was in our 20s, and I think you
Early
were
20s. Yeah.
friends with my younger brother Don first, right?
Right. Yeah. We worked
Great.
together at CompuMat.
That's right. That's right at CompuMat. And I ended up working there too. But I think where other than kind of hanging out, where we really started to connect was on the music side of it. And I can't remember if the first band I was in, you were in that band, but eventually we ended up in a band together. I think I can't remember. I think it was Dave Battistini, Barbush Bob was playing
It was.
guitar.
Yeah.
You
I
weren't in
wasn't
that
in
one,
that
right?
one. No.
Okay.
I was
But
in the. It was. I think we called it figure of speech.
figure of speech. Oh yeah, that was the fun one. Yes, that was a
Yeah,
good time. And
that was a
then
great time.
that was a great time. We'll get into some of that stuff. And then a later iteration when I got into Christian rock, and I
Oh yeah,
think you joined for at least a gig or two with that, right? Or did you
yeah.
join that, or were you part of that band? I can't remember.
I think I sat in one gig. You played in
Okay.
some church, and we did a bunch of Kansas, and yeah, and I played on those in that gig.
Yeah. So anyway, so we go way back and we've worked together in different forms over the years. But probably from my perspective, biggest connection is, music. We have so much of that in common, our passion, our love around that.
Yep.
So now we both grew up on the southwest side of Chicago. You were probably more of closer to Chicago than I. Tell folks about kind of your background, your family, and how your musical journey started.
Yeah. So grew up in Oak Lawn, born and raised, right at around 102nd and Kenneth. It's about a mile from Chicago. proper, you know. So yeah, it felt like it was living in the city, growing up in the city. Um, we lived in Saint Germain Parish, so Catholic upbringing,
Hmm.
which I think back to those days, and everything was about what parish are you in, because there's a big Irish, Polish South Side community, and everything was kind of felt like at the time everything was just organized in parishes and different churches.
Hmm.
Where's your boundary? We talked to people and relatives, and it's I was in Saint Germain and grew up. So my dad's a paramedic. My mom was a secretary, and I think it was probably around 6 or 7. My uncle had a piano in his house. I think he was like moving pianos. It was like a part-time gig that he had, and someone sat down to play, and it just hit me. I remember that feeling of standing, probably eye level to the keyboard, and it just the tones, everything just hit me, and I told my mom, I said, I want to learn how to play the piano, and so we got this upright piano, and I think it was 1976, and I started taking lessons from Mrs. McDonald. She was in 1976. She was probably 90 years old. So
By the
yeah,
way, do you
I don't think
remember?
she's
Go ahead, finish what you're going to say.
yeah I don't think she's with us anymore.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Do you remember the brand of the piano?
mm, I do not. But the
Because I
second
remember the
piano
other
we got,
piano. Okay. Yeah.
yeah, the second one was a baby grand I have upstairs, and that's a Howard. It's a Baldwin brand piano. Um, And so right around, I don't know, somewhere in the middle of 76, I was 7 years old, started on lessons and did that with her up until I probably a good 6 or 7 years, maybe longer. Either she couldn't teach anymore, or I ended up changing to going to Mother Macaulay High School after
Jenny
school.
McCarthy.
Yes,
Jenny
that's right.
McCarthy. Yeah, she's from that.
I
Yeah.
think she's a year younger than me,
Yeah.
or ahead of me, or something like that. Maybe the same grade. I can't remember. But I used to go there after school, and there was a nun there that taught a lot of classical, and that was what I got into right around freshman year of high school was classical music. And so she was teaching me all these classical pieces, and then I was like, this is boring. So I told my parents I needed to do something else, just like learn like different styles, like jazz, pop. I really wanted to get more into pop and rock. And so they found that at St. Xavier High School, which is right next door, I'm
Hmm.
sorry, St. Xavier University, which is
Right.
right next door to Brother Rice and Macaulay. It's all this big, corner there at Pulaski and 103rd. There was a teacher there doing jazz improv, and it was basically a college composition class. So they enrolled me with that, but it wasn't like I think I was just he was doing it as I don't know, more or less an outside gig because I
Hmm.
really didn't. I didn't get any college credit for it, although I probably should have, because I went through the whole semester, maybe 2 semesters with him, and we did a whole jazz improv thing. His name was Barrington Coleman, was the name of the teacher,
Wow. That's a
and
unique name. Yeah.
he was a phenomenal player. I think he went on to actually tour with like orchestras and wherever, because he was kind of like a temporary teacher professor there. And it's funny because I think the where I stopped taking lessons was his class, and we did at the end of his class, at the end of the semester, there was a
Hmm.
recital. There was like an actual recital, and I didn't know what it was really, and I was always really nervous performing, and so he brought me in to this end of the semester recital, and I was the only one performing.
Oh, wow. No, no pressure there, Mike.
No, none. So it was this little auditorium. It was really tiny. I think it was even a lecture hall that they dragged a piano into. And I said, I'm just like, wow, I was blown away, right? And I sat down. He had 2 pianos, and he said, "All right, I want you to sit down and play a piece by yourself, and then we'll do a duet." So I sat down and I did. I don't remember what it was. I was probably blind, nervous, and I just played whatever. And then we sat down and played a couple of jazz pieces together. And the place was they loved it, And it was like one of those moments where after I'm standing there and people would just coming up and talk to me like, "Oh, this is great," because I was 15, you know,
Yeah.
and this was a college. This was a college, basically class, and I felt okay, this is cool. It kind of got my head a little big around, my
What,
skills on piano, but it
but
was it was good.
in question around all that, up until this point, because when kids are younger, you're out playing, unless you
Yeah,
find something you're like incredibly passionate about, usually your parents kind of prod you, they recognize or they see
yeah,
something. Was this kind of a joint venture, the learning how to play an instrument, or was this, did you start it off and then they're like, wow, Mike's pretty good at this, or what was that like up until that
yeah.
point?
Well, in the early years, in the first few years, it was very hard. Like piano's not easy, and I
Right.
started at 7, so I remember uh, that practicing every day. My mom would put an egg timer on the piano, turn it to 30 minutes, and I'd have to practice every single day for 30 minutes, and I hated it for years. Like I would cry, I'd be slamming my fist because every week the pieces would get a little harder, so
Hmm.
they kept pushing you to the new level all the time, and it was grueling, and I think I wanted to quit several times, and she's like, no, you're doing fine. She'd set the egg timer for 30 minutes. I'd play. She'd walk out of the room. I'd turn the timer down to like 5 minutes and finish early. Like she had no clue, right? I'm sure she knew. But yeah, so it was the first handful of years was like she definitely encouraged me a lot to keep going.
That's awesome.
And
So then
yeah,
when you hit this recital at age 15, I'm guessing this was your first time experiencing that feedback from the
hmm
work that you put in and that energy that comes with performing and feeding off of the crowd. Is that fair to say, or?
yeah, in that setting, definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, I played other recitals, and I played in many other settings, even
Okay.
for parties at the house, where there's 100 people in the house. Um, every holiday I would play all the Christmas carols and everybody'd sing, and stand around and sing all the Christmas carols together, which was really fun. Great
Yeah.
memories there with my uncle Mickey. He'd sit next to me. We'd play. He'd sing all the Christmas carols. Um, but in that kind of setting where you're in the spotlight as like a solo performer of this, complicated stuff. Yeah, that was kind of the first experience I had with that, and the attention that went with it, which I didn't like, but you know,
That I find that interesting. But did you have any, up until that point, did you have any real musical influence, that jumped out for you, that when you weren't doing formal training, that you were just playing down on the piano yourself because you liked a particular artist, or was there any particular artist that you felt strongly about at that point?
um, on so yes, so on piano, I was always pushing to learn more pop modern music because what they teach you back then is all the classics, all the
Hmm.
standards, and you have to learn all the nursery rhymes and all those those little simple songs, and then some of the old classics, um, and like MacArthur's Park and Boppo for JJ, and there's like all these classical pieces, like especially not just classical music, but classical pop pieces too,
Yeah,
like
cultural.
from the
Yep.
40s and 50s, these songs that everybody plays. So I was always like, okay, yeah, I had enough of these dozens of these songs. I wanted to play something, you know, like rock. Yeah, and I started getting into guitar, bass guitar a bit in my early teens. And Rush was a big influence there because I was a big Rush fan, and there was not a lot of rock music that had heavy synth, and they had hit that period right in the mid '80s where they started adding more synth to their music,
Mhm.
and I was like, oh shit, I got all this. I can play bass and I could play the keyboard parts like Geddy Lee did, and that was really like a turning point, honestly, where I went from just being a pianist, where I would like focus in on being a solo piano player to
Hmm.
I want to be a musician. I want that I can play multiple instruments and I want to do rock music.
And
And that was a transition my parents did not
yeah, I'm sure. But it's
like.
interesting though. Really, two things. One is um, Rush is not a pop band; it's a rock band, and it's
Yeah.
considered prog rock, which there's a technical aspect to prog rock, whether it's Yes, Dream Theater, all right. So these are people
Yep.
who are actual like real musicians. A lot of
Oh
them
yeah.
went to school, and they were classically trained. So that's interesting, kind of given your training and the jazz and all that. I'm surprised though, because the area that you grew up in, and half the guys from Styx, and talk about the
Mm-hmm.
parish. I think
Yeah.
they went to St. Linus maybe or something like that. And I think
Yeah.
Kevin
And
Cronin,
Journey.
yeah, a
Yeah.
couple of guys from
I'm not
REO.
Journey. REO Speedwagon.
Yeah,
Yeah.
REO Speedwagon. In fact, they may have been even closer to you, to where you lived.
Well,
And then who was it? They were from Champaign. Oh my goodness, what's that other band? Mama told me, yes, she told me.
oh, Cheap Trick.
Cheap Trick, thank you.
The rock group.
The rock group, yeah, yeah.
Oh, they're
So I'm
from Rockford.
surprised those. Did you see any of those guys at that?
Oh,
Yeah.
well, no, I mean, I'm glad you brought that up. I mean, that was a huge influence. I mean,
Okay.
especially when I got into the teen years, eighth grade. So when I formed my first band, it was with a friend of mine who played drums, and we were, I think, seventh or eighth grade, and we were just huge into all this, everything that you just
Hmm.
mentioned, especially because a lot of the guys were local, and if you remember back
Oh
in the
yeah.
'80s, every other block had a garage band playing.
Yeah.
You
Right.
could. I would ride my bike and we would just hear bands, come out of garages and be like, "Oh wait, we got to stop and listen." And so that was what I really, you know, dove right into, and it was because it felt local, like
Hmm.
Pumpkin Studios on 95th Street.
Right.
I
Right.
mean, every time I drive by Pumpkin Studios, I would be looking like, "Hey, are they there? Is there a guy? Is there someone out there loading their gear?" Like, I would look every single time, and I would pass that Pumpkin Studios probably 7 times a week.
And
You
if for
know?
people who don't know, Pumpkin Studios, a guy named Gary Loiza owned that. Actually, his son
Right.
went to school anyway. But so the bands like Styx. In fact, Gary produced even post Dennis DeYoung. I think he did most of, if not all, of Styx albums until he passed away several years back.
Oh, he
So
died. I didn't know that.
REO, yeah, yeah, he did. He
Oh, I
he
didn't
ended
know.
up dying from cancer, unfortunately.
Oh, wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, about five, and they did a big tribute for him. In fact, I can't remember if it was Dennis who pulled him. Obviously Dennis is not part of Styx anymore, but
Right.
it was either Dennis who pulled him up on stage right when they
Okay.
knew, or if it was Tommy Shaw. I just don't recall, but yeah, but he ended up passing away. I don't know what ever happened to Pumpkin Studios from that point going forward. But you're right,
Well, he
culturally, like,
closed.
oh,
Yeah.
did they close? Okay, okay.
They closed in the late '80s, I want to say, or '90s, and because Gary moved everything to his house or something in Orland Park,
And
right?
and I yeah, yeah, and I think
Yeah.
there's more backstory there, but
Yeah.
anyway, yeah. So keep going.
Right. So, I mean, that was a huge, huge influence being on the South Side, and blues too. That was another thing that, um, once as I got older. So, even as a teenager, I got into blues enough, but it wasn't anything that was super, inspiring or driving me anywhere, other than learning how to play guitar with basic blues riffs like every other guitarist in the world.
Hmm.
Um, but even today, you look at you, and you really realize how much American music, has been influenced by the South Side of Chicago.
Hmm.
The
Oh
old
yeah,
blues legends that came out of there. Was his name Sill or someone who just died yesterday? Sill Lieberman. I can't remember his full name, but
buddy guy.
he's an old. I mean, these are old school blues guys that
Hmm.
Led Zeppelin, the Beatles, the Who, all modeled
Yeah, yeah.
after these. So it really, like, if you look at American rock music or rock music in general, rock as a
Hmm.
genre, I believe it came out of the Delta blues
Hmm.
and Chicago blues
Hmm.
and Elvis. You
Hmm.
put all that together in the '50s, and that's what happened. That's how the '60s music came about.
Mm-hmm.
And then from
Mm-hmm.
there, we came back to the states and we did everything like the Eagles and all that next generation of rock music. But yeah, being from that area has it just feels really special to have grown up there and know that so much of music history is from that area.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I think we're really blessed, and I want to get into kind of the music scene and up in the industry how it is right now. But one thing, because you're a prolific songwriter, and I want to spend some time on that. But uh, did you have the bug to write back then?
I did.
You did.
I wrote
Okay, I
Yeah, I
did. I
wrote my
didn't know
first
that.
song at 13.
Wow.
It was called Your Eyes. I could still play it on the piano.
Wow. Wow. Okay. I did
And
not
it was
know that.
before and that was 5 years before Peter Gabriel's In Your Eyes. I
Okay.
was yeah.
Are you going to sue him? You didn't sue him.
It's a totally different song, just the same title basically. Um,
Oh,
but yeah, so I don't know if you remember my cousin Michelle. She was really into music at the time,
I
and
do.
I was
Yeah.
yeah, and she was a great singer. Um, and so I would write these little pieces, and she would sing. We actually made a couple demos early on together. Um, and we were trying to do a band together, probably around freshman, sophomore year of high school, somewhere around there. But yeah, my first official song was called Your Eyes in about in when I was probably like 1982 or 1983, somewhere around there. And then in 85, 86 ish, I went to Hair Bear Studios in Evergreen Park, and that's when I recorded like my first real demo of songs that I actually did everything. So that was my first attempt at other than guitar. So I did drums, bass, keys, sing. I did all the singing, but I had a guitarist. So Jeff, who owned the studio, was an awesome guitarist, and
Hmm.
he played some, and then some guys that I was in a band with at the time, Eddie Smith. He's from the Beverly area. Phenomenal.
Okay.
This guy was like Eddie Van Halen knockoff. Like he could do all that, everything, which when you're 15, it was like, how
Right.
is this possible? And I asked
Right.
him, I said, hey, do you want to, play on these songs I wrote? He's like, oh, sure. And so we hashed them out in my house and went and did them. He knocked them out in like one take. And I found the tapes. I had to buy a tape player, right? I
Oh
had to
my
buy a cassette
gosh.
player to listen back to some of this stuff. I did it about a year ago because I found all the tapes. Not that they were lost, but I just had them in storage, and I'm listening back to all that stuff. And my God, it's uh, it's not horrible, but it's obvious it's not great. And the music, I think I'm proud of the music that I
Yeah.
recorded in when I was 15. Like I think the only thing that was missing was like a real producer that can act as a mentor to say, okay,
Right.
maybe if you tried this vocal, that would work out a little better. Or if someone to help just mature me as a songwriter, which I didn't
Right.
have. Just kind of winging it. I was just throwing everything I could think of it on tape. But yeah, so it started really early.
And it's amazing actually. I see. I can't believe I didn't know that your writing went back that far. That's incredible. And the other thing that's incredible, it says a lot about how you're wired too. The fact that um, could pick up different instruments, and play all of them and write. Your passion for music clearly is incredibly strong, and you've kept that through into your adult years. But it takes a really special human being. I couldn't write a song for the life of me. I mean, I could take like a Weird Al, like what Weird Al does, and take a stupid song after a few beers and make up words, But I couldn't write a song. So I'm more of the I get inspired
I
by
definitely
other
can't.
people's stuff and singing and all that stuff. But so it's a incredible talent, to do that, and then at such a young age is quite incredible. Have you thought about converting any of that stuff to digital, just
Oh
for
yeah,
long
definitely.
term?
Um, yeah, I started on it, and it's a big project, but yeah, I mean, the amount of recorded material is beyond management at this point. Like, because I have tapes dating from the mid '80s through like the you know late '90s.
Hmm.
These are cassette tapes, right? And then I switched to digital somewhere. I want to say I was using the 4 track still here in the basement in this house, which we moved in '98. So probably somewhere around 2000, I switched to digital and started to use the hard drive recording. So,
Hmm.
so look to, add up from 85 to 2000 uh, on cassette tapes, which I probably have 30 of them, 30 tapes filled with music. And then from 2000 to today, at least another 1,000 tracks of music. I don't know. It's so much that I was telling my wife the other day, I said, I started going back and trying to see if I can come across a few ideas to repurpose. Like because I have a lot of ideas I put
Yeah.
down, but didn't really finish the song. Like this could be a good hook or this could be a good verse.
Yeah.
I've got hundreds of maybe over thousands of those. So I went back and I'm like, and I just got deer in the headlights. I'm like, oh my god, there's so
Where do you
much.
start? And
Yeah,
and that's actually a question I wanted to ask, like the process of songwriting. I mean, I watch, a lot of interviews with artists. Sammy Hagar had a good show there for a while, where he was interviewing a lot of guys, and he asked the question, well, kind of what's your process for writing, depending on who he was talking to. And some of the greatest songs were written in 5 minutes, and then
yeah,
other ones take forever and a day. And then the second question he would ask is, well, did you know this one was going to be a hit? And they'll be like, either hell no or yeah, or some guy, I can't
yeah,
remember who it was, said, people who say they know they're full of crap. So, what is your
yeah,
process for writing a song? And has it changed over the years in the raw sense of kind of the idea?
yeah. Uh, it's definitely changed. But there's a lot of habits that I have around writing that hasn't changed in 30 years, 35 years. Um, where when I first started writing, it was I would take out the electric guitar and just throw down some chord progressions
Hmm.
and and then try and fit a bass line around it and a drum line and then maybe I'd put lyrics to it. But I had like a lot of instrumental stuff in the early days because I didn't. I felt like I wanted to partner with a singer, that somebody
Hmm.
can do some real singing and at the time, and add to it. So I didn't really think about lyrics and as a. I didn't think about melody and lyrics as part of the process early on. I only thought of basically like the rhythm section
Hmm.
is really
Hmm.
what I was doing in the early years of writing. But as time went on and I started singing more and playing more, the process became as soon as I found a nugget of an idea, I would immediately try and put some lyrics and melody to that idea, and
Hmm.
I wouldn't let the song evolve too much until I started layering in some melody and lyrics to it. More so the melody, because the words you can kind of work in there.
Hmm.
Um, and I mix and match words now, so I do a lot more lyric writing than I ever have, which I always found very difficult to do.
Do,
Um,
do you
but
ever do you ever start with just a lyric, like, man, I have like a subject, almost like a writer, you have a subject
yeah,
matter on your mind, and just start writing things down, and then it kind of from there. So you okay.
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
definitely. And some of the better ones, honestly, have come out that way. Like Waterloo, which is a song I put out middle of last year.
Hmm.
Um, that one, uh, I I started writing the lyrics and I kind of envisioned the concept of the song right away. I'm like, oh, I get where I'm going on this, and then immediately jumped on guitar, and and started writing basically the full song all in one,
Hmm.
based on where the vision of the lyrics go, right? And I think that's probably if I were to teach songwriting, that's how I would teach it. I would.
Ah,
It's
okay.
almost like, and maybe because I'm wired as an entrepreneur, start with a vision, have a concept of the song, and have a vision of what is it you want out of this?
Hmm.
Is it if you go into it and say, you know what, I have this really cool lyric that I think could be a nice folk song. Let's make a folksy type of feeling around this song, and it will come together that way.
Hmm.
Because the
Hmm.
the thing about songwriting is, and I've done this with a couple of my songs, is you can make it any style and genre that you want. Like um, I could take a song where I had this. It was like this rock song.
Hmm.
I need to live my words in such a way. It's like this rock. I have electric guitar just jamming away, and then I could also and I rewrote this song to be more like a reggae song. I need to live my way in such a way that you find them clever enough to listen over and over. So I just changed kind of like the
Hmm.
feel, and
Hmm.
I like it both ways. So
Hmm.
I could say I could go the rock version, which is like almost like a uh, what's his name from American Idol, the bald guy, like that power rock thing, or it could
Hmm.
just be reggae, right?
Oh yeah, I know who you're talking about. I think his daughter just committed
Daughtry.
suicide. Yeah, Daughtry. Yeah, Daughtry. Yeah, yeah. Well,
Um,
that's cool. Um, let's talk about kind of the projects, how you've gotten to this point, right? Because
yeah,
one of the things about this podcast, and this one's probably going to be a little more wonkier, and we'll have more musicians probably listen into it. It's like going to a Rush concert, right? If you go to hear Rush, you're into
yeah,
Rush, whatever. But so obviously you got that training, and you've
mm-hmm.
created color, kind of how you've become, who you are. But from a kind of projects you've done over the years, well, whether it's bands,
Yeah,
you know, you've done some really cool stuff. What are some of the things from that first band you were in along the way that helped you get to who Mike is right now as a broad artist of not just a singer songwriter, but performing in front of people?
yeah,
That energy, I know when I was singing in a band and when I do little projects or whatever, that energy keeps you going, at least from
yeah,
my
for sure.
perspective. So talk a little bit about that. So you were in your first band. What kind of music did you guys do, and did you play out, or was it school
Yeah,
shows, garages?
yeah. I mean, there was all the way from eighth grade through senior year of high school. There was probably 5 or 6 different bands. Um, None of them really had. Um, the only one that had like traction, and we had multiple gigs going, was the last band, and I was in a high school called The Business, and that was with. It was kind of like the our. We ended up coming together probably early senior year, and it was like our going away party of high school. There was the
Awesome.
two football players on the in the band. We had one of the drum majors who was in the marching band was the drummer. Fred Papp, awesome dude. He went on to play with um a couple of other bigger bands actually. And then we uh, we played a bunch of gigs, and um, but that was probably the one throughout my teen years that was most memorable and most organized. And I played keys and bass in that for a while, and then we got a bass player, and I just stuck to keys and vocals. Um, and that one, I would say, that was probably the first band where I thought I might be able to be a real singer someday. Because I never felt super comfortable singing. I always felt like, it didn't come naturally to me. Like for you, I didn't have this natural vibrato or anything like that. It was
Hmm.
a huge, huge process and a lot of work for me to sing
And
the
you
way I do
sound
now.
great, by the way. Well, your
Thank
music
you.
sound, yeah, yeah.
Thank you. But that was I was singing back then. It was the Cars and the Romantics, and we were doing like college rock,
Hmm.
70s rock we were doing, and we recorded a demo in that same studio, Hair Bear Studio, and I had to sing that song. Uh, oh shoot, I just lost it. I'll think of it. But at the end, it's a super high note, and I had to hold it. And
Ooh.
yeah, and the engineer is we're recording the song, and he's like, Mike, he said, you can't wimp out on that part because I wasn't nailing it, and he's like, you just let it fly, like let it go. It doesn't matter if you're off key or whatever. Just you gotta release and feel
Give
that.
yourself permission.
Yeah, exactly.
Seriously, as a singer, like
Yeah,
when you start to like push yourself, there is a big psychological thing where you have to give yourself permission to do it. It's kind of weird.
yeah.
So yeah,
It is weird.
yeah.
Yeah, and that was my like. I remember standing in the studio, all the rest of the guys behind the glass, and I'm in by myself singing this last line, and I had to
Yeah.
belt it out. And they're like, "Dude, that was awesome! Like you nailed it." And it took like 3 or 4 takes, but I just finally let it. And so I kind of built up a lot more confidence through that,
Yeah.
and and then went on to record a lot some more demos with Jeff after that. But so then there was that, and then second year of college, I remember that we had this great band. We were doing Talking Heads and In Excess and the Thunderbirds and a bunch of. I mean, it was a great,
Wow,
great.
that's a broad.
Yeah,
Wow.
I was the youngest guy in the band, which is typically what I was the situation. Other than that high school band, like
Hmm.
um, oh, I forgot to mention that. So let me go back one step. So when I was a sophomore, this time I met Mike Zillis. Um, I was working with that Eddie Smith guy, the guitarist I told you about, that was just killing the
Hmm.
Eddie Van Halen licks, and he wanted to pull a band together, and I was on keys, and we had this bass player who um, supposedly toured with uh, like major acts. This really nice black gentleman from the South Side. He was so cool. Like he was a dripping musician. Like everything about him was music, and he was just a killer bass player. And so we were doing like uh, Jimi Hendrix songs, and I mean
Wow.
this, like we were doing all this really crazy stuff. And Mike Zillis, who, as we both know, went
Hmm.
to the same high school as I did, and he's a drummer. And I put a sign up saying, "I need a drummer for a band." And Mike answered that, and that's how I met him because he was 2 years older than me at
Hmm.
school, at high school, in high school, and
Did he think he was Neil Peart at that point?
he did. He had a huge rack of drums, um,
Oh yeah.
and so we used to practice in his basement in Palis, and we had this. It was the three of them, and it was four of us, and but as it turns out, and Eddie and the bass player, which I don't remember his name, he had a nickname. I didn't even really know his name. I just knew he went by a nickname. I can't remember it. These were much older guys.
Hmm.
I was 15. Mike was probably 18. Eddie was 21, and the bass player was probably in his mid 20s.
Hmm.
And so the bass player is probably 10 years older than me, right? Super cool. Like, he's just telling stories about being on the road, um, and it just vanished. Like one day, we just couldn't get a hold of these guys anymore, and the band just was, I guess we don't have the band anymore, like because
Wow.
they just went away,
That,
and
that is wild.
I think they probably just got other things going, and
Yeah.
you know, but um, and then Eddie ended up doing the sound for I got in touch with him later on, and he ended up doing the sound for our last show as the business. Remember I was telling you the band I was in high
Hmm.
school.
Hmm.
It was a yoga part. It was a toga party,
Like yoga. I don't even think.
a toga party,
Yeah. Oh
and he
yeah.
did this. He did the sound. And real quick, funny story. He comes in completely stoned. I mean, he was out of his mind, and he couldn't even lift up the the PA speakers because he was just
My
he
gosh.
comes walking into the gym of our high school, and the band's there. I brought this guy in to do sound, and I told the guys, oh, this guy's awesome. He's gonna make us sound great.
Yeah.
He comes in, he's like, hey man, can you get the speakers? And I'm like, oh Jesus, and so we go load the gear, and the guitar player's looking at me like, what's with this dude? And so we get all the gear on stage, all of his PA
Hmm.
equipment, and we're all set up basically. And the PA is just sitting there. We didn't know what to do. It's his gear, you know. He goes over, and there's a piano on stage in the gym, you know, and we're like a half an hour from showtime. He goes over, he sits at the piano, and he starts tinkering around, and he's playing the piano. And the band is standing there on stage looking at me like, oh, what is going? Are we going to get a sound set up, or what's happening? And so I go over and I go, Eddie, I go, you know, the show starts in a half hour. Like, we have to get this set up and sound checked, you know. So it took us almost another hour to get the sound set up. We had to lock the doors of the gym, and it turned out there's like 300 people showed up, and they're all standing in
Wow.
the hallway of the high school by the gym doors, you know. And so we're trying to get it set up. The right half of the PA, you know, on the right half of the stage, the
Hmm.
PA speakers weren't working at all. They were completely
Hmm.
dead. So we're trying to troubleshoot all that, and we couldn't get it. And we were like, screw it. We're going with what we have. One side of the PA is working. That's fine. Let's
Hmm.
let them in. And so it was like we opened the doors, and it was like, you know, what you see in the movies. Like, everybody just rushed to the stage,
How
and we
awesome.
started playing our tunes. And it actually, a lot of the photos from that show ended up in the yearbook.
I was
And
gonna say, did you?
yeah,
God, I wish I had more photos or video even from back in the day. Did you guys capture any video from that show?
I don't. If we did, I don't know of any,
Yeah.
but
One of
I was just
the
proud to be in the yearbook.
Oh yeah, right. One of the things that, and eventually I want to talk about kind of the where the music business is going. But one of the things that was really cool in that era is the college scene, the music scene was
Mm-hmm.
phenomenal. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is how Ario, Styx,
Yeah,
all these bands. I mean, you did the bar thing, but the college scene was huge. So you
huge.
had an
Yes.
opportunity back then to see like big name band. I mean, these were like the future,
Yep.
mega rock bands. And so there was kind of a path to eventually showcasing, and maybe getting a record deal. It was like you starting
Yeah.
out in that garage, doing the parties, and we could talk about
Yeah.
some of the parties that we did. But and so there
Yeah.
was kind of a path that you would follow, and then eventually showcase, and there'd be some bands that I remember Dennis DeYoung actually got. I think he was trying to help whatever that band. What was that band out of Payless? They were kind of like the Bon Jovi-ish.
Dreams.
Dreams, yeah, yeah. They were good. They were really
You're
good.
really good.
And I think JY actually may have tried to help them too.
Yeah.
And it didn't, so you could get a couple
Yeah.
names, and they did great. And I still
Yeah.
think they probably play every once in a while, and they were a really good band. Anyway, point is, it was a great period of growing up,
Oh
whether
yeah.
you were a musician or not, but being in the music thing, um, you know, kind of the path that you had to work up to. It was more obvious than
I totally
probably
agree.
is today. Yeah.
I think that um, as a musician, and I would put us in the same um, age category. I think we missed the real prime by 10 years. I think if we
Hmm.
were born in the late 50s, early 60s, where we would have been teenagers in the 70s and musicians, I
Yeah.
think we would have. I think it would have been a whole different ballgame for us because we would have been, I think, like right in the thick of really the prime of rock, you know, where
Hmm.
you would be part of it and part of the
Hmm.
scene.
The
I
scene,
think
yeah,
we
creating it. Yeah.
I think where we came in, and as 18 to 25-year-olds, it was the late 80s, early 90s, and it was like, you know, it was Bon Jovi, it was the big hair, it was transitioning
Right. Right.
from rock, you know, from 80s, 70s in rock, it was transitioning to alt rock and grunge, and then they lost their way. Like rock basically just just plateaued, I think, around that point, and
Hmm.
not much really happened other than the Foo Fighters since then. um,
Hmm.
you know, and but yeah, I think that um, if to be 10 years older back and then to be a musician would have been a phenomenal opportunity.
Yeah.
But to answer your, your question from earlier, I think then, moving into the next few bands, which we were together in one that
Hmm.
figure of speech band, that was another big, I would say, um, maturing moment. Where you have to work with the band and you're adults and it's like, okay, we have to come together, we have to make decisions together, we have to perform together, we have to
Right.
act as a team.
Right.
And that was kind of the first where you're like, oh, okay, it's not just about me just being great on one instrument, it's about how can we really act
Right.
together as a unit and make something happen. And you kind of learn what that's all about. And guys like Len Shalacy, who was our guitarist,
Yeah.
he just
Yeah.
had, he just had such of that natural musician
Hmm.
attitude where he was,
Hmm.
everything's cool, man. He'd never get put off. It would always be
Hmm.
like, I learned from guys like that. And there was other
Mm.
guys along the way where you just see their attitudes about how they treated each other, how they dealt with what we're doing artistically, or how are we managing things.
Hmm.
Um, and it's almost like having a good partner in a business or whatever else. It's like you learn how to manage,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
respect what's happening together. And I think with music, what's tricky is there's a lot of egos in play,
Right.
and I had to learn this, because I felt, honestly, when in my early years, because of all the training in the piano and the classical, I kind of felt like, oh,
You already earned your cred,
you're,
man.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
like you're lucky to have me. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
let's but and I learned that that's just the wrong way to
Yeah.
look at it. Um, and and the most recent um, experience with that was the country band I was in a few years back, where we were playing all around here, all the big circuit, like festivals and
I
everything.
saw some of the videos. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, um, where we were making probably decent money as far as like the cover band go. Like
Sure.
you don't get farther than what we were doing as a cover band. Like that's kind of like the end
Hmm.
goal if you're going to be a cover band. Um, and that was another learning experience because we had a couple professional guys that were playing with us, like that guitarist, and he played pedal steel. The dude's a pro, is a pro. He gets hired all the time to play
Hmm.
pedal and six string and banjo. And his attitude about the band was so mature and so laid back, but yet he was a leader and he didn't even know it.
Hmm.
And watching him and how he interacted with the other musicians, um, was again another great learning experience. And then some of the greatest memories musically, I feel, are when we're collaborating and there's a band around. You know,
Right.
it's fun to be in the studio and to write something and come up with an idea, but when you're on stage and you're sharing a moment with good friends who are musicians and you have a
Hmm.
crowd out there who is having a great time, like that's hard to beat.
Yeah.
Those are really good memories.
Yeah. And so with the writing side of it, because I know when we played together, I mean, it was all cover music, and I
Yeah.
don't ever even record or remember. I think maybe Lenny at one point wanted to try to write something, but that just kind of wasn't our thing. I don't think.
Right.
Um, how did like the passion for writing? You're a really well-rounded musician and I would say artist because you've got this great balance of, you could go into your home studio and get that cup filled,
Hmm.
play every instrument, record what you want, and now you're doing producing. Um, so when you're playing in a band, it's different. I mean, I
Yeah.
don't. Did you ever set out to create a band just like to do originals, or for
Yeah.
you? Because having the entertainment company, I work, have been around a lot of different people. They have different visions for what they're trying to do. Um, what what was your thing there, as far
Yeah.
as collaborating, writing in a full band versus a solo, and then surrounding yourself maybe with people playing your stuff?
Yeah, I did. In fact, the first official album wrote and recorded was called "It's About Time." You can kind of see it in that little thing up there. My sister
Oh
made
yeah,
in
on
the
the
shadow
left.
box.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
cool.
that I released in 2002, and then put a band together to play around Chicago, with those songs, and then some other, you know, originals that weren't on that album.
Hmm.
And so I had it was a four piece, and they were all pros. And um, we played probably a dozen shows, maybe not even that, 10 to 12 shows. It was a rough go. I mean, this was, you know, again, 20 years ago.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
and fronting an all original band is something I never, did, and so it's like, okay, here we are on stage, and we're all here to play Mike's songs, like, okay. Um,
I could
but
only imagine actually fear,
yeah,
insecurity, but then at the same time, hey, it's I'm actually doing it.
yeah,
I'm actually doing it. Yeah,
yeah, it was all that. And
yeah,
it was fun. It was impossible to get people out to come out to the shows. I mean, there's that's a whole other that's we could talk about that for 4 hours of what it takes
yeah.
to get people
Right.
to come out to your shows.
Yep.
But I had a few friends and family show up, and then some, because I did mostly in the city, because that's really where they at that time, maybe still now, is really where they had original bands. Original
Hmm.
music was mostly in Chicago proper.
Yeah. Yeah.
Down at the venues that would sponsor and bring in original music on a regular basis.
Hmm.
As you know, the venues in the suburbs,
Right.
98% of them are cover bands, if not
Yep.
now all tribute bands,
Yep. Yep. Yep.
because people just want to know what they're getting, and I want to go out and see an REO band. Okay,
Yep.
I think that's where it's ended up. But anyway, yes, um, and that was I really enjoyed that. It was, um, I felt for a second that, okay, I'm going to make this a real deal. Like, I'm
Hmm.
going to take these songs, I'm going to get another album and then another album, and I'm going to start expanding a tour and getting things to expand out into its own brand.
Hmm.
Whether it's going to be Mike Eklund as the artist,
Hmm.
or a band that I rename, or I'm just kind of like the primary songwriter.
Hmm.
And so that was a pretty focused goal for probably a year or two, probably from 2002 to 2004 ish, somewhere around there. And but at the same time, I had a full time job in technology and a
Hmm.
family with
Hmm.
babies.
Hmm.
My daughter was born in 2000, my son in 2002. So uh, um, those it didn't feel like it was completely in the cards for me, and
Hmm.
and to be if I was being completely honest, and I think I've told you this before, the material wasn't there.
Hmm.
Like, I had so much more growing to do as a writer and a
Hmm. Hmm.
singer, that um, when you're going to go out and make a go of being an artist, quote unquote,
Hmm.
you got to really be at the cream of the crop.
Hmm.
You don't have to be, like, you go out and do whatever you want. Like, you can play open mics all day long.
Right. Right.
Great. Fine. It's
Hmm.
fun. Good for you. Um, I don't mean you, but I mean a
Yeah. Yeah.
songwriter.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Yeah. But to be an artist where you're going to be maybe on a label someday, or you're going to hope to have a fan base that's going to
Hmm.
pay to see you, that's going to
Hmm.
put out $30 to pay to see,
Right.
you really have to you got to provide that emotional value to them, you know,
Hmm.
and that requires a level of art, I believe, that is meaningful,
Hmm.
and some people like, some bands like, uh, what did I just see? Those bands from the '70s rock, they hit it early. Like, all those guys were in their teens or early 20s, and they were writing, masterpiece rock
Right.
anthems. But they were
Hmm.
young guys doing that.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, but they were providing this emotional value for that crowd at the time, so they swarmed to that, you know,
Hmm.
um, which is ironically a problem today, because music is so distributed that it's easier to reach someone, but harder at the same time. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so, I always felt like, okay, if I was going to be a full time artist and have this brand around Mike Eklund music, that
Mm-hmm.
it would require this level of artistry that I think I, you know, I may have hit it on a few songs, but
Mm-hmm.
not a full concert that would
Mm-hmm.
take me around the world. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, and that's that's fine. That's fine.
Yeah.
I think the bigger thing, well, I don't know. I'm not you, but kind of from the outside looking in, and just kind of how you live your life, you're getting your cup filled. I mean, you're in the
Mm-hmm.
business, you're still being very creative, you're working with other people. And that
Yeah.
is not a bad thing. In fact, I mean, look at Richard Marx, for example. I mean, I
Yeah.
don't think the average person knows how many songs that guy writes for other people. They just know him from a couple of his own hits that
Yeah.
he's been out there. I mean, I could rattle off 50 names, people that I've, come across, or even like when I'm doing bigger name festivals and bigger name bands
Mm-hmm.
coming in, where I'll be behind stage and you'll have, and I'm not kidding you, I won't name, where some of the musicians are meeting each other for the first time, like the
Yeah.
guitarists, like I
Yeah. Yeah.
played with you with this band, like road people,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
they did the homework, they're pro at the pro level, and they get up on that stage, and the singer who's the name, and you got
Right.
these other people back there, but they aren't necessarily, I didn't know who they were. I knew who,
Yeah.
the front was, and they're making a living at it. In fact, there's a guy that I'm going to be having on. His name is Rich Schroeder, and I met him up north. He's a literally working musician.
Yeah.
He does
That's awesome.
300 shows.
Yeah.
Okay. His goal is not to do his own deal, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
but he pulls up with his rig of stuff and people come out. He has a great time. He makes a living at this, and he's been
Yeah.
doing it for, 30 years.
Yeah. I
And
love that.
yeah, and he pays, but so I'll sit and talk with him, and he's just a great guy, and he's a rock star. And what he
Right.
does, he happens to do more country music, but he's being fulfilled, and he's doing what he wants to do,
Yeah.
and he's making a living at it, and that's really the big thing. I one thing though, did you? And this is kind of how the business is changing too, and I want to get into that for
Mm-hmm.
people who are coming up through the process right now. But didn't you have Dada play at your house?
Yeah.
Some sort of
Well.
because there was like a movement, and I think it's still out there, but you got to be tied into Super Fan Club. Is
Yeah.
certain artists will be touring and they'll have time in between shows or whatever, and
Right.
you could have them come out to your house. Talk about that experience. And I
Yeah.
think because you're a big fan of those guys, aren't
Oh
you?
yeah.
Obviously,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I played with them then. When they came
Yes.
in. Yeah.
So tell me
That
about,
was.
yeah, how cool
I don't
was
know if I
that?
have the picture. I don't have it nearby, but I can show. I'll send you a shot of me and Michael playing together. Um, so yes, there's a. It all started. I'll make this as concise as possible. There's a Facebook group basically for Dada fans. Like every band has a kind of
Yep.
a fan group, on Facebook or wherever.
Yep.
And there was this fan group on Facebook. They're like, hey, we're looking to. There was one person in particular. Her name's Jen. Fantastic individual. She's a huge Dada fan and a Rush fan. And
Interesting.
she was out of Evanston. She's like, I'm looking for someone to host Michael from Dada. He's the lead guitarist, singer
Hmm.
from Dada, um, at a house concert. And um, we were, and this was back, boy, this is like 2009. This is a long time ago now. Um, and house concerts were just really starting to get known as a concept back then.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so, I raised my hand and I reached out to her. I said, "Tell me more. What is this all about? I'd like to help out. I'm a huge
Hmm.
Dada fan. I've seen them every time they come to Chicago."
Hmm.
And so she's, we ended up meeting in Dundee, and I had another musician with me who I was working with at the time. We talked about how we can make this happen, and so we picked a house in Dundee that was best suited for this. It was the wife of it was the musician that I was hanging with at the time. It was
Mhm.
his house. Ended up not mine, but his house. And we hosted Michael for the first time. Um, and it's basically, you know, we just bring in a solo. So it was a solo guy from Dada. So we
Mhm.
brought in Michael like 4 or 5 years in a row, and I think where I helped out. And then it kept going after me, and there's a house in St. Charles that he played in since then. So since about 2015, he's been playing in St. Charles once a year. Basically, he comes in for that show.
How does that work? Like, hey, we'll set you up, we'll free beer, $500. I mean, or how does
Yeah,
that work?
yeah. Well, it's a much higher fee than that, but
Okay.
yeah, but yeah. So you got to cover all the. Every artist has their own deal, but for
Sure.
Michael, cover everything, and pay him to play, and he puts on a phenomenal 3 hour show. Like it's just he
In your
plays.
front room.
Yeah,
Oh my
and
gosh.
and so when he came the first year, I think I did play with him. I did the first time he came to town. Um, I played bass and keys, and I actually played snare drum on Dada on Disneyland, and and so I had to meet him at his hotel, and I brought a keyboard over. I knocked
Mhm.
on his hotel room door, and he's there with his girlfriend, and he's like, "Hey, nice to meet you." And I was like, "Jeez," because I
Wow.
was a
Yeah.
huge fan of this guy, right? So it's always
Did, didn't,
weird.
didn't you and I go see them up at UW
We did,
Madison? That's right. Okay.
yes,
Yeah.
at
Yeah.
a bar, like a little
Yeah.
bar.
Yeah. Some little bar, right?
But we
Yeah.
also saw him in St. Charles, didn't we? At the Arcada Theater
Yeah.
Musical.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um. So, uh, we sat down at like 2 in the afternoon, and he had a list of songs, and I already kind of rehearsed a bit. He told me which songs to get prepared on,
Mhm.
and he didn't know anything about me,
Right.
you know.
If you
So he's
sucked or if
yeah,
you.
he didn't know. He goes, so he just knew that I played something, you know. So he's
Okay.
like, "Can you?" And and we had a keyboard, and so we were playing the song, and he's like, "All you need to do is hit these two notes here." I said, "Well, I I, I know how to play piano. I'm like, what are we doing?" You know.
Right.
And so he's like, "Oh, okay, you're a musician. Great, great." And so that went really quick after that, and so I played a bunch of stuff, backgrounds on piano, or it was like we set up like little pads, string pads, and organ pads,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
then bass on a few songs. We did this jazz song on bass, and he's like, "Do you know how to play this? Do you know how to play? Do you know how to walk up a minor scale on the bass?" And so I'm like, "Yeah, I think so." And if we did, I show him. He goes, "Okay, yeah, perfect." He goes, "Just do that," and he played around it. And so I ended up sitting in with him for good 45 minutes of his 3 hour
Wow.
set, and
Wow.
we probably did 10 tunes together, and Disneyland was one of them.
Can you, I mean, this is crazy. And because, I do all kinds of stuff. And there's been times where I've DJ'd and I love Dada and like the Bodines.
Yeah,
And I'll play a song and people have no idea who the hell these guys are, right?
yeah,
Because their grab your guitar and could
yeah.
you maybe do a couple chords or verse of Disneyland so people kind of
Oh yeah,
know once they hear it. It's like even
yeah,
like with the Bodines, people from Wisconsin, right? They're from Wisconsin. You're like the Bodines, like, well, who the hell is
yeah.
that? And then you start singing good things, and they're like, oh
Right.
yeah.
So this I just ran away from home. Now I'm going to Disneyland. I just dropped the fifth of gin. Now I'm going to Disneyland. And then he goes into that. That's it. He does all these jazz chords in
Yeah.
there, because he's a big jazz player.
Okay.
Um, so we did that song, and then we did
Oh, another good song. Yeah.
it's called Dim,
Oh yeah.
and so yeah,
That song brings back a very specific memory and time in
yeah,
my life. Actually, I think it was going up to NIU
oh
and
yeah,
partying.
yeah, oh, yeah. That was '92. That's
Yeah.
well, I I can't remember the year they came out with that album, but yeah. Um, and that Michael is just he's a virtuoso. The guy is phenomenal, and him, just on acoustic or on electric,
Hmm.
sitting alone in a room, he's just super captivating and just a consummate performer. Everything,
Hmm.
songwriter, master musician, storyteller, joke teller. It's like, if you had to do a master class on how to perform at a house concert and entertain a group in an intimate setting, this guy
Hmm.
would be the one to teach it. Like, he's that good. Um, and so, yeah, that was a lot of fun. And we had Joey in too. Joey was the darker haired guy who actually sang most of Disneyland.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
He plays the bass, and so we brought him in 3 or 4 years to
Okay.
do. Is he also has I don't know if you know this, he has a bunch of solo stuff, and he and Phil, the drummer, are now
Uh-huh.
Seven Horse.
Really?
Yeah,
Okay. Wow.
and and if there's a new show, there's a new movie out on Netflix called Home Team with
Okay.
Kevin James,
Oh
the
yeah.
King of Queens guy,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
where he's playing Sean Payton. He's playing the coach from the New Orleans Saints. It's a true story about Sean Payton when he got suspended
Wow.
for buying hits on guys.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, so there's a scene when Kevin James gets to Texas to coach his son's Pee Wee League. I
Hmm.
don't want to give away the movie too much. The song that hits out of is Seven Horse. It's I think it's
Wow.
Low Fuel Drug Run or something. It's one of their it's one of their bigger songs. And I'm watching the movie. I'm watching the movie Saturday, or yeah, we're watching it,
Hmm.
and I'm making dinner and I'm kind of watching the movie, and then I heard this, and I'm like, I said to my wife, I go, that's Seven Horse, that's Joey's song in this movie, and so it was that was kind of cool. They have, I think, another song in Wolf of Wall Street.
That's cool. It's so funny because if you look at certain directors or even actors, like I could tell what's his name, Adam Sandler's a Styx fan because he's had
Yeah.
multiple Styx songs in the movies. And actually, this is a good segue because haven't you done a little bit of work as far as writing songs, jingles, and
Hmm.
submit stuff for movies? Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's called Sync, Sync work. Yeah. So um, a couple years back, a good friend of mine he has an advertising agency, and he's like, "Hey, we need some music for Sesame Street. They're doing this thing. It's a special little, I don't know. It was like a some kind of special video. I don't know. It was like it wasn't like on their regular show, but it was like
Hmm.
Sesame Street branded something or other. And we need something really light and nursery rhymish. Do you think you can come up with that?" I'm like, I could try,
Hmm.
and so I wrote a little acoustic number for that, and they liked it, kept it, and used it for this. It was
Nice.
like Sesame Workshop is what it was. Um, so then they went from there. They hired me to do um, probably 6 or 7 other projects that
Nice.
were so corporate videos,
Hmm.
um, uh, you like background music for like YouTube essentially is
Hmm.
what it ended up being. Um, and So Opinion Lab was one of the companies. Um, Houghton Mifflin, the educational, they have the books and the
Hmm.
textbooks and all that.
Yeah.
That was a big one. I wrote it in a full song. I wrote an actual song with words where
Hmm.
they gave me a topic, and they said, we need, this is something, again, nursery rhymish. We need learn and play, is we ended
Hmm.
up calling the song, learn and play, and or play and learn and play. And so I wrote some lyrics to it. And there was an interesting process because I had to like write out the lyrics while I was writing the song, and I would send them the lyrics to approve of like the words and everything
Right.
because
Yeah, I'm
it's
sure.
very
Right.
topical to what they were doing,
Yeah.
and I had to be edited by them as a songwriter,
Right.
which was pretty
Right.
cool. Like they're cool, and it was so
Yeah.
fun. And that was a full song um, that is in that is part of a training video that Houghton Mifflin used for a series of uh, academic, programs that they have where they
Hmm.
give teachers to teach them all this stuff. It was
Hmm.
like the music that bed that went along with that.
Now, did you,
Yeah,
do you, I'm just curious because I'm less knowledgeable about this part of the business. Did you, who owned the rights,
I well,
the
it
publishing?
depends.
Okay.
Um, I own the I own the rights to the master rights to all of it.
Okay.
The publishing, um, I can't remember exactly who did it, but each one had its own contract.
Okay.
And so
Okay.
I actually had a friend of mine who I worked with at Music Now, who's an entertainment lawyer. He did all the work for me to
Are
get
you
all of
getting
it.
royalties?
um,
Or was it
no,
you just pay you X for, because
it was
most of
paid.
this stuff it's a one,
Yeah,
but then if you're there, I know there's at different levels, like for a movie track, something like that, that's a
yeah,
whole different ball game.
exactly.
But yeah.
These were not like I wouldn't get performance royalties on these because they weren't performances.
Right.
They're not being played in the radio. They're not being played over and over on YouTube or
Okay.
on some channel, right? It's other the YouTube thing probably is, and I probably could look up something for that, but no, these were like one time bulk
Hmm.
pay in bulk for the pay for hire
Nice.
kind of thing. If I were to get placed for a commercial or something on TV, something in a movie, or on the radio, then you would get ongoing royalties
Hmm.
every
Hmm.
time that's played. You get as long as it's in perpetuity, yeah.
Hmm.
And that's how
So
that side of it works. Hmm.
let's switch over a little bit and talk about working with other artists, younger
Hmm.
artists, and producing, and kind of. I don't know if people necessarily understand what a producer does. So even just
Yeah,
using that term, and it's probably similar in the movie business too, and kind of conceptually.
right.
But so what does a producer do? What is the
Yeah,
role of a producer typically in the music recording
yeah. It's a good
business?
question, and then you get varying answers. Um, I would say the most common use case, if you will, of a producer in the music business is someone who is helping the band creatively uh, record and basically record their art, record their
Hmm.
music. They're helping them through as that objective party outside of the group to say, um, like what George Martin did with the Beatles. Like I like that verse. Maybe if you switched it up a little bit here, it could
Hmm.
be a little bit more of what you want out of that song. You know,
Hmm.
and so it's being that objective consult on the creative side, but
Hmm.
it's also being like a mentor to the artist
Hmm.
and saying,
Hmm. Hmm.
we're going to get through this process of, if we get stuck in a song, if we like, oh, I don't know if this is going, I don't like this part. I don't know. The producer's going to help them pass that boundary to get
Hmm.
the stuff done. So like if you talk to people in the business, they'll give you the technical answer and
Hmm.
more like a project manager.
Hmm.
That's what the role of the producer is to make sure the stuff gets recorded and it's ready for the record label. That's
Hmm.
what they'll tell you in the big business. But what what really happens, and it's more collaborative, it's more artistic in nature, like I'm doing with Brianna
Hmm.
Sieber, out of Wisconsin. I'm
Hmm.
helping her in all ways. She has a core idea of a song. She's got lyrics. She's got a melody. She's like, I have a little vision on the song, and I help her bring it to life, the whole
Hmm.
thing.
Hmm.
So and that and I've helped. You know, I haven't done it. I mean, it depends on the artist. So
Hmm.
you got artists who will record like everything on their own in their own studio at home or whatever, and they'll just drop a bunch of tracks and say, hey, what do you think? Can you mix this down? Can you make this sound better? Can you add keys? What do you do what you think you
Fill
would
in the
do?
gaps, thicken it
Yeah.
up, blah, blah, blah. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And so then at that point, those are great projects because it's like here they're handing me something that's 80 to 90% done.
Right.
And I'm looking at it like, how would I put the final touches on this? I'd say maybe I add an organ here. Maybe I'll add some background harmonies here. Maybe I'll add a shaker. Give it a little bit more groove in the rhythm. So
Mm-hmm.
you're looking at all aspects of the song,
Mm-hmm.
the the groove, the feel, the melody, the attack. Depending on what the song needs. So you kind of
Mm-hmm.
have to know, is this a heavy metal song? Then you got to come out with some heavy metal chops in order to make that right. Is it a folksy song? Then you got to treat it with more of that folksy spirit
Mm-hmm.
in order to fit that thing. And I think that's where uh, all of the work I've done as a songwriter over the years has helped me in that role
Right.
because I've tried all those things. I've made
Mm-hmm.
electronic music, I've made
Mm-hmm.
folksy, rock, prog, jazz, blues.
Mm-hmm.
I've written and recorded all those genres for myself.
Mm-hmm.
So when I sit with an artist and you say, you tell me what you want out of this song, if they say I don't know, I'm like, okay, the first thing we got to do is you got to know where you want out of this song. And I
Right.
ask them, I said, if you could pick an artist to play this song on stage for you, who would it be? Right.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I did with Brianna.
Right. So you got a place to start and to kind of
Yeah.
formulate, and then when they're singing, their natural thing comes out, and then you could kind of, yeah,
Right.
tweak it. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Because if
yeah.
you're, and because it could be a big problem. This
Right.
is what happens a lot of, uh, beginner is that, oh, I want to do this. And so they want to sound like Van Halen, but
Right.
they've written a song that is Bob Dylan.
Right.
It's
Right.
like, okay, well, we gotta figure out what we do with this. Like how do
Right.
you your vision doesn't match what you've
Right.
laid
Right.
out in
Right.
front of me,
Right.
you know.
Right.
Um, but
It's
that's
interesting. I've listened to, I mean, I deliberately seek this stuff out, listen to different artists who've worked with, whether it's like Van Halen or whoever.
hmm
I think Ted Templeton was a big one for them for a long time. And they have a particular sound. So over time, that producer actually
yeah.
is part of the band, if you will, or like the
Oh, for sure.
outfield, which I'm a huge outfield fan. When they switched their producer and John Spinks did a lot of stuff, but when they switched their producer, I mean, it changed their whole sound. And
Yeah.
I'm part of the fan club. A lot of people, well, they lost what made them, you know, that's an interpretation.
Yeah.
So I think they're having a good producer is really important if you're gonna. I think it's definitely in general to have that second set of
Yeah.
ears for sure, but in particular, coming up into the business and getting to the point to where you actually want to take this a little more seriously.
Right.
Okay. And you want to put a demo together for whatever reason it might be. And there's so many different paths now in the music business. And I guess that's kind of a good segue. So it kind of touched on, our era, if you will, and even before,
Yeah.
how people came up, they played in the clubs, played parties, did the college scene, they showcase, or they might go in the 80s, LA, everybody's going to
Oh
LA,
yeah.
now it's Nashville.
Yeah. Right. That's true.
Everybody's going, and they're going to play the Troubadour. It's going to play, Sunset Strip, and
Right.
yeah, they get a
That was a
good
rite of
following.
passage back then.
Yeah, it was, right. And then
hmm
that's how they
Yeah.
got, their hits. So now the whole world has changed given technology, and really it's technology that has changed,
Yeah.
kind of the platform. So you got social media, you've got, even television, Disney, believe it or not, right? Look at some of the
hmm
people who came out of Justin Timberlake or Britney
Yeah.
Spears. But even social media, probably the best example of somebody who's incredibly popular and still relevant is Bieber, right?
Yeah.
And now this whole influencer thing. So on one hand, And I don't know their individual journeys, so I don't want to say they didn't do the club scene or whatever. My guess is most of them probably didn't,
Yeah.
in general. But I don't know for sure. But what I do know for sure is the mass public got to know them through a different media,
Hmm.
before they did that first album per se.
Right.
And then even the nature of how you make money in the business, has changed. I mean, you really don't make a lot of money selling albums unless you sell a gazillion albums, you know.
Yeah.
And I mean, right now with Spotify, people are bitching again on the streaming, how little artists get, you know, using Rogan as an example. You're going to give him $100 million and he's controversial and blah, 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 blah. And what's her name just came out with something, but you know, they're
Yeah.
getting a small amount of money from the streaming music. So they really have to make money off of touring. I
Yeah.
mean, there's exceptions. There are mega stars out there, okay, who still make a ton of money off of the pure content. But really touring, merchandise, starting your own business, owning, you know, holding on to the rights to their music. I think that's always been, you know,
Yeah.
a way of how people long term make money. But so from your perspective, where do you see this going?
Hmm.
How do you think artists, I mean, you're working with somebody right now. I mean, I have my opinion from a different kind of what we do on the side. And I can talk a little bit about what I'm seeing from that perspective, but big picture,
Yeah.
I mean, how do you get heard today and actually have the opportunity? That's probably the wrong question because you could get heard by just getting on TikTok.
Yeah.
How do you
That
make
was going to be my answer.
literally, right?
Yeah.
TikTok. You can just,
Yeah.
and what's your take on the business, man? Where do you see it going, man? And
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, yeah, it's definitely changed in a lot of ways, because of those things you said. Uh, I found a ton of really, really talented musicians on TikTok. I mean, it's staggering. Some of the guitar players that are out there, singers, piano players, both songwriters. Um, they're all there and the algorithm is surfacing them to the
Mm-hmm.
right people based on the people's what those people like to hear. You know, it's
Mm-hmm.
automatic that they're getting found. Um, so uh, as far as the distribution method and of taking, you know, building a fan base and getting your music heard,
Mm-hmm.
um, those those that's changed based on the internet and social media for sure. But I'll tell you, this is what we learned with Gigable, which we didn't talk about, but was a music
Mm-hmm.
company that I had for about 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that the most important thing for an artist to be successful is their commitment to their craft and their fans.
Mm.
Period. End of story.
Absolutely.
If they can continue to write and create and write stuff that they're proud of on a regular basis, which means they treat it like a job, which means that
Mm-hmm.
maybe they're writing 100 songs a year or more and releasing 30,
Mm-hmm.
right? Of the best. And
Mm-hmm.
maybe they even have some more that they put off to the side that their super fans get a taste of. Um, and they know how to they know how to manage themselves and
Mm-hmm.
their own brand for the people that are liking them and people that are being attracted to what they're doing. They have to be able to manage that relationship to those people,
Mm-hmm.
because there are so it's pretty complicated. But I'll try to. There's big labels still out there
Mm-hmm.
finding the next Taylor Swift and
Mm-hmm.
putting them up on a pedestal and, like Idol and The Voice and all
Mm-hmm.
that.
Mm-hmm.
They're
Mm-hmm.
making careers that way still,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? There's careers being made.
And it's
Um,
multifaceted too. I mean, there's
yeah,
fashion, there's, you know, perfumes,
exactly.
clothes. I mean, it's the whole big brand. That's a
And
great
once
point.
you have an audience, you can then
Yeah.
branch out and have more
Yeah.
products in your
Yeah.
little business. Yeah, you can have your music and then you can come out with a fashion line. Yes,
Yep.
absolutely.
Yep.
But you have to have an audience there that's ready and
Yes.
willing,
Yeah.
and you have to have a relationship with that audience in order to make that happen. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
say what you want about Taylor Swift, and yeah, she had help from big label. She is a perfect example of how to manage a billion person fan base. Like,
Mm-hmm. Wow.
if you
Yeah.
get that to that point where you have a really big fan base, just follow what she does. Like, follow her strategies, and you'll be
Mm-hmm.
fine. But getting to that point, getting from zero to your first, 10,000 fans, if you want to
Mm-hmm.
call it that, that's the hard part. And you need to be really, really consistent, and you have to have a consistent voice about what's happening in order to get there. Um, and we worked with a lot of different artists. I worked with a lot of different artists
Mm-hmm.
at Gigable. And the one thing I saw was
Talk
that,
talk about I probably should have
yeah.
started with that. Talk about what Giggable
So Gigable
is
was
or was.
was um, a music technology platform. It was basically Ticketmaster and Spotify.
Mm.
So if we built a mobile app that was a streaming service, and we layered on top a ticketing service that you can find new artists with. So we brought together like this discovery platform
Mm-hmm.
where we curated it, and we surfaced really talented songwriters in all different genres and gave people immediate access to where to see them, and it would be based on your location. So if you're in Nashville, it'd be easy to find a whole bunch of
Right.
undiscovered or up and coming emerging talent and go see them somewhere. If
Mm-hmm.
you're in Aurora, Illinois, maybe not so easy, but the more artists we had in there, the more likely it was you would find, you know, someone nearby
Mm-hmm.
that might meet what you like. And so we had this whole artist relationship side of the business that where we were building this roster of
Mm-hmm.
artists, and so we worked with dozens, if not hundreds. And the one thing that was really consistent that I learned throughout that period was it was more the success of the artist is almost completely based on their attitude.
Mm.
Are they mature enough? Are they
Mm-hmm.
evolved enough? Are they ready to be an artist that has a fan base?
I think you're right because that's what I see too. When I'm meeting, I'll call them up and comers where they're playing bigger venues, festivals, that kind of thing. They've done the radio tour, whatever. They may have been on a TV show or whatever, but they
Right,
haven't hit the big time. How hard they freaking work,
right.
it's like right in line with their maturity and what they're
Yes.
willing to put in and really hone in their craft and experiment, but really, really work. There's one in particular during COVID, she couldn't play out live. She set up on her own because I don't, she wasn't making enough money where she had her manager, she couldn't have her manager or whatever. So she went out and set up a radio tour and went
Yeah.
out and hit all across to keep her
Nice.
stuff, that was getting some plays on the
Mm-hmm.
radio. So most people, other people I know, and they were afraid.
Yeah.
They stayed home. You know,
Right.
she just kept working and
Yeah.
found a way, and it paid off. She didn't have this little gap. Especially when you have a window. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
So yeah.
and so what in the back in the day, what record labels will look for is that combination. Do you have
Mm-hmm.
something unique to offer that we think that this market is going to like in your
Mm-hmm.
music? And can you keep the band together? Like, do you have the collective unit within this artistic group
Mm-hmm.
to deliver on the goods?
Mm-hmm.
And you have to keep it together. And now, because you could play on social media or TikTok and have 1,000 people see it in one day. That's great. But then what are you going to do with those 1,000 people?
Right.
Are you going to
Monetizing it.
are you well, yeah, are you going to build that relationship? Can you monetize it?
Mm-hmm.
How are you going to deepen that relationship, like the Taylor Swift thing I was talking about? Yeah, how are they going to maintain that so that they will become real fans and want to follow you for the next decade,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, that is the elusive quality, I think, of what it means to be, an artist.
Do
Is
you think like do you think it's I mean the way you connect definitely has changed, but that connection create like Rush. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
They retired on their own terms. They could have kept going, and I think their fan base wouldn't have
Yeah.
changed. And the whole new generations, right? There's a
Yeah.
lot of artists out there. I mean, even you don't hear Styx being played on the radio. They're one of the top touring bands as far as
Yeah.
making money. And they got another new album that came. I think they're on studio album. They're on like number 19 or something like that.
But they
But
are being played on classic radio.
it was yes, yes. In fact, I heard I shouldn't have said that. I can't think of the name of the song. I just posted it up on our Facebook page. I just thought it was a really good video too, and the musicianship too, especially
Yeah.
like if you go out and see those guys. Okay, it's a couple. There's two original, but they are unbelievable
Yeah.
musicians. They all could
I'm,
sing. And Tommy Shaw, he's still got a phenomenal voice. He's not having to do backtracks. There's
yeah.
guys out there now from the 80s who are singing the
Lip syncing.
backtracks, lip
Yeah.
syncing. I mean, this is like the real freaking deal. So, and they've gone through this transition of the technology platform and all that kind of thing. So they built that relationship. And so I think putting good content, you still have to love,
Yeah.
but I think you're right. There's this early formation of a relationship for the most part. I think my gut tells me that where you have an opportunity to connect with people. I think you got to have good music,
Yeah.
obviously because it's a very
Well,
emotional thing. But
I wrote this piece. I'll send it to you. On I had a theory on this a couple years ago.
hmm,
On, you know, think about as a music fan, right? What did you fall in love with and why as a music fan when you're
hmm,
growing up? Now, when you're in your early years, 12, you're a teenager, you're in early 20s, and you're
hmm,
maturing and all that. Very, very, there's everything that's coming at you. You're taking in like a sponge, and so whatever music is happening, it's becoming part of you, and then it sticks with
hmm,
you forever, right?
hmm,
Um, it takes a lot of work
hmm,
as a 50-year-old person
hmm,
to go and listen to the new band, that might be real hot right now, whatever genre, doesn't matter what
hmm,
genre, and
hmm,
sit there and instantly fall in love with that, right?
hmm,
It takes a lot of openness as a 50-year-old to really experience that and say, you know what, this is a band that I want to stick with.
hmm,
So, given that premise, what's happened is you've got to think about the population in general, what age group they're at, and what music is happening at the time.
yeah.
Because you're gonna you and I growing up in the 70s and 80s and 90s, like most of what we've listened to and most of what we listen to is based on that. And if you and
Hmm,
we're probably more versatile because we're in the business and
hmm,
we know what to look for is with the new talent.
hmm,
But you
hmm,
take someone off the street, like I use my wife as a perfect example because you know, she will not go the extra mile to find any music at all. She's just like she's hitting red buttons on the radio like, okay, the Eagles are on. Yeah, let's listen to the Eagles. And 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 I say, what about this new band? And she'll give it like 4 seconds, like, no, don't like it. I'm like, how do you know you don't like it? And but then there are some things where I sneak I keep putting the playlist and I keep playing it over and over
Yeah.
and then eventually she's like, oh, okay, I've heard this song before. Yeah, I've been playing it for 2 years. But she doesn't know who they are. You know, um, but she's like a regular music consumer,
Yeah.
right?
Living life,
Which is most of the
Yep.
people out there. They're
Yeah.
most
Right.
that they're going to fall in love with something at an early age, and it's going to stick with them, whether
Hmm,
that's a genre or a feel. Like she likes Tears for Fears, and so if there's a band that kind of sounds like Tears for Fears, she'll click onto that. She goes, "Hey, that sounds like Tears for Fears. I kind of like that." Right? And it could be a band that just came on the scene yesterday.
hmm,
But Tears for Fears has been programmed in her already,
hmm,
as
hmm,
Toto, Africa.
hmm.
She loves that song. And those are things that, um, but that's how it kind of works. So when you know when you're a musician, you do have to think of the audience,
Yeah.
or an artist. You have to understand your audience, And again,
Mm-hmm.
to the Taylor Swift example, she absolutely understands who her audience is. And if you're a if you're a band that's in a bunch of dudes in your mid 30s and you're playing folk music, folk rock like the Lumineers from the late 90s, good for you. Like you got to know where to find those fans.
Right. Right.
You know,
Yeah.
to like what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't no one's saying stop what you're doing and find something more modern. They're just saying find the people that that style resonates with.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't think about that. And the guys that we worked with, the people we worked at Gigable, they're like handing CDs out to throwing there to everybody. Like,
Mm-hmm.
well, you probably handed out 100 CDs and 100 people will never
Right.
open it because they don't know who you are. They don't know what it is. They have no context of what it is. You just wasted 100 CDs. I guarantee you no one's going to be a fan from handing out those 100 CDs.
So do you think then to hit the broadest opportunity to present your product, which is yourself, obviously you got to be good at your craft,
Yeah.
and you've got to have content that's at least good enough, to be posted. Um, so I guess logically, yeah, TikTok, social media, putting it out there and just keep producing, boom, boom,
That's
boom,
step
boom, boom,
one.
boom. Because I've heard managers tell younger people, and I don't rep individuals, you get 1 million people or some number
Yeah.
following you, and then I'll come, manage you,
Yeah.
promote you, that kind of thing. So, I mean, they're watching that. They're
Yeah,
watching
they
that.
are.
Um, so, I mean, is that the best way to put yourself out there from your
To,
perspective?
um, I mean, it's
Like for
certainly it's
that
very
folk
valid.
singer, right? That folk singer, there's 7 billion people on the planet, right?
Yeah.
How does that folk singer
Yeah.
know where to go? Obviously, you could play the club scene, just do your tours all over and that kind of thing, and kind of,
I would start with YouTube and TikTok. I would, if he's a folk singer that's like the Lumineers, that
yeah.
sounds like the Lumineers from the whenever they were big, big. It was probably
Mm-hmm.
10 years ago. I don't know.
Yeah.
Um, I would, I would create, I would do a couple Lumineers covers, and I would do a killer version of it where it's like anybody who looks at it is like, wow, that's great.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and because what you want to be able to do is is connect with those other Lumineers fans because they're already in the mindset. They already have
Mm-hmm.
context
Mm-hmm.
around what they're going to hear, so that it's gonna resonate quicker, and the algorithm is going to reward them. So if they get more likes and they get people watching that because it's in their lane, right?
Mm-hmm.
The algorithm is going to reward that. TikTok kind of works the same way, but it's more across the board, But YouTube is an extremely valuable tool for musicians, like probably still the number one tool, because you can you can coattail from finding where the fans are
Mm-hmm.
that would like what you have to offer, and you can continue building a relationship with them very
Mm-hmm.
easily. Hit the
Mm-hmm.
subscribe button, and they're going to get notified every time you come out with a new video. And video is where it's at, you know. Um, and uh, and I would definitely just you know YouTube and TikTok all day long, as but you have to know your audience. You have to know what you're going after.
Mm-hmm.
if
Mm-hmm.
you're if you're all over the board and you're showing how you create a new way of slicing a pickle on TikTok, but you're a musician, that doesn't matter. That's not going
Well,
to mean anything.
so like for the average person, I don't think Bieber had a producer when he started out and he was posting crap out there. That was just him doing his thing.
Yeah,
But that's not the average. I mean, that's a talent. I mean, who writes? I mean, you wrote
he
music at a
was.
young age, right? So,
Yeah, well, no, he
um,
was. His timing is perfect, right?
yeah,
He was
yeah.
he was doing he was releasing stuff on YouTube that was you know that was resonating with all of those the same people who were jumping on that
Yeah,
platform at that time. He
yeah.
grew with the platform. He went from, you know, all the his perfect fan base was coming on the platform as he was doing that.
But the point that where I was headed was, I it seems obvious to me he had his own identity. Like he kind
Yeah.
of knew he was cool in his skin. He was
Yeah.
doing what come
Yeah.
natural to
Yeah.
him.
Yeah.
And my point there is, a lot of people aren't that are on YouTube or whatever, or TikTok, they aren't necessarily at that level where they kind of know their, so
Yep.
it would seem to me, there's no downside to where if it isn't clear as day for you, to get connected with a producer, spend the time in the studio, and get some mentoring, and
Yeah.
where you could figure out what's natural, what is your natural kind of
Yeah.
sound with your
Right.
writing, and
Very
helping
important.
somebody. Yeah.
Oh,
And
absolutely. I
then,
mean,
yeah.
the mentorship, having someone who can help you just identify where you are in the journey, period,
Hmm.
which is what
Hmm.
I wish I had back in the 80s, is like, you are at the beginning, and this is what you should think about at the beginning of your journey, right?
Hmm.
And as a musician or an artist or a songwriter, and and having that, even having someone all along the way to who can help at least just give you be that sounding board and be that person that can help through that with a producer or collaborator or any, I think is super important
Hmm.
for an artist to. You are right, 100%.
So, we're going on almost 2 hours, which is
Yeah.
great. I want you to play, pick a song or two, one
Okay.
of your favorites that you've written,
Okay.
and let's hear it.
Okay. Yeah. So I'll play an old one and a new one.
What's the backstory?
Okay. So the first song I'm gonna play is called Soul Surrender, and it's the second track on my first album. Um, and it's basically, I wrote it around 30 years old ish, and it's about the age where you kind of, you're into your career, you're into your thing,
Hmm.
and it may not be working out as you had planned, right? So it's like you put in a ton of effort, whatever the effort is, and you just feel like you're coming up short. But what
Hmm.
is it going to take to get to that next step, that next tier, whatever it is? You feel like there could be something better, and so that was kind of where I came from on this. So this is more of an introspective type of song.
Okay.
I have a bunch of those. I see some people have sold their souls to the masses to achieve their goals. They do it again and again without a worry on the cost. And I've been trying for so long, I'm ready to ask the price. And I've been trying for so long, I'm ready to ask the price. Your voice is my instrument. You speak like God himself, drops of inspiration right into my soul. Please take me there. And I've been trying for so long, I'm ready to ask the price. And I've been trying for so long, I'm ready to ask the price. I'm ready to ask the price. fretboard every night and fret that nothing will transpire. My story is sometimes too dull to tell. I fear that I am lost. And I've been trying for so long. I'm ready to ask a prize. And I've been trying for so long. I'm ready to ask the price. I'm ready to ask the price. I'm ready. I'm ready. Yeah, yeah. I'm ready. Yeah. I'm ready. Yeah, yeah.
Nice. I love
you.
it. Wow, that was really good, Mike.
Thank
That was
you.
really good. Wow. All right, what's this next one? And then I got one more
So-
question for you.
Okay. This one's called Waterloo. So this is the one I wrote. This is one of those songs like we were talking about, where it came together really fast,
Mm.
and I had the lyrics, and I had to sit down and grab the guitar, and just like slam it out, and it came together very quickly. So this little backstory. I was on a business trip to Waterloo, Iowa, a couple times. We had a client there, and it's just like this little town that struck me, and the guy I was traveling with grew up in that town.
Hmm.
And so we sat down in this little bar, this little crappy shit little bar, and he was telling a few stories about what it was like to grow up in Waterloo, and then move to the big city, Chicago. And for whatever reason, it kind of stuck with me, that whole experience in the little town. It's a nice, middle Iowa town, beautiful. So just had these lyrics and just came up with it. So. It's a great life, alive and kicking, motor running, living every day by the hour, by the minute. We were living like kings in Waterloo, in Waterloo. Cruising down the causeway, windows down in Ozzy. We knew we were headed somewhere far from here. Waterloo. Once in a while, I get to thinking that times were tough, but we did the best that we could. And all of this time later, I see that it's exactly as it should. Cruising down the causeway, windows down in Osceola. We knew we were headed somewhere far from here. Waterloo.
Awesome, man. That sounded great. That sounded
Thank you.
excellent. I lied. I have more than one more question.
Okay.
So this is so cool. The last time, maybe it wasn't the last time, but it might have been the time before. I can't remember. We got together. I'm still living in Wisconsin. I come down to Illinois to see my kids, or we'd connect socially, have a beer. And you had shared with me. So what we didn't get into is that you were adopted as a
Yep.
child. So, and I remember you were so excited to tell me that you actually reconnected with a sibling who you did not know existed. You did the research and all that,
Yep.
and happens to be a musician,
Yes.
which is freaking phenomenal. Could you tell that story? Do you mind?
Yeah. No. It's. Yeah. Thank you. It's amazing, actually. So 2 years ago for Christmas, my daughter got me a 23andMe uh, for a gift, and she's like, I think we need to know more about our health history, because we didn't really have it, and I have a little bit of a health thing going on, and she's like, I think we need to know. Okay, so I took the test, and what came back, I opened the thing up, and it said I had a half brother. So I was adopted at birth. I knew I was new as adopted.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Um, but didn't know anything about that past because it was through Catholic Charities, and that's all sealed.
Right, right.
So I could go back and get more information now, but I think it's all unsealed now. But even all the way into up till about 10 years ago, all that stuff was sealed off. So and it turns out that this one half brother, he you can set your public setting on 23andMe whether you want to be completely unknown or if you want to share if you have any relatives or siblings.
Mm-hmm.
And so he set his to share, which I had set mine to share. And so it popped up half brother, like, oh my god. So I messaged him in the app and I said, hey, looks like we might be half brothers here. And so he replied back, that's pretty wild. Let's get on, can you text me and let's get on a phone call? So that night we jumped on the phone,
Wow.
and and it's just a crazy, crazy story. Um, his name's Scott. He's 4 years younger than me. There's another brother, Mike, who's 2 years younger than me, and there's another brother, Brian, who's 2 years older than me. The three of them were raised together. I was the second oldest, but I was given away because of some issues
Mm-hmm.
at the time. She's going through a divorce or whatever happened. You never really know.
Right.
Well, there's
Yeah.
some people that know. That's a whole other story. But,
Yeah.
um, uh, and then as it turned out, we met. We ended up meeting, having a few drinks, and our lives are almost spitting image of each other's. We're all three of us are musicians. Three out of the four are musicians.
That is
Two of them, the younger ones, Scott and Mike, grew up in St. Bede Parish, which is not even 2 miles from where I grew up.
that is
Mike went to
insane.
Mike went to Brother Rice. I went to Marist. He was 2 years behind me. And people so when I was in high school, I had people saying to me, "Hey, you might have a doppelganger or a brother at Brother Rice because someone there looks like you." I remember this clearly, and I'm like, I blew it off. But
Mm-hmm.
obviously, that could have been him because we looked at his yearbook picture and mine, and it's like crazy how much we looked alike. Um, and so we had the same mother, and I was probably a different father or whatever. So,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and they are Scott is an amazing guitar player, like really, really good, hard rock uh, guitar player. And here's the thing: their first demo was recorded at Hair Bear Studios.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
That's
right around
amazing.
like 1 year after. So remember when we went there to do our figure of
Yeah,
speech
yeah,
demo?
yeah. Yep.
He was in that place on Office Cicero.
Mm-hmm.
They went there right after we were there to record their first demo.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. That is
Yep.
amazing. So are you guys gonna do a project together?
We already have done a few things. We've
What
played two gigs together so far,
that's right. I remember you doing that. Okay.
um, and Scott and I have done some writing together, and he's got a solo album he's working on, which I just mixed his first song, which is,
Wow.
I think I sent it to you. And So I don't know. We'll see. I might be more involved with his solo album. He's got started with it, so um, I hope we work more on it together. We'll see. But we're definitely probably do at least one or two brother shows, as we're calling it, uh, a year. Kind of like a family reunion type of thing.
Dude, there are no coincidences. I don't believe it. I've
Yeah,
lived long enough now to see. I mean, I'm sure we could talk lots of different. God is amazing, man. You were
yeah,
meant, seriously,
yeah,
you guys were meant to reconnect. Who knows where it's going to go?
yeah,
That is so
yeah,
wonderful on so many different levels beyond the music stuff, just
yeah,
knowing that you've got, other
yeah. It's
family
super
out there.
cool. It's very exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mike, thank you so much for carving out time. So, how do people get a hold of you if you're an up and comer or somebody with experience? And Mike, I know you got a studio, home studio.
yeah,
You want to get in and maybe record a demo, or you'd like some mentoring, or you need a producer for a project. What's the best way for people to get a hold of you, Mike? And then how do they? I mean, you just played a couple of your songs. You've got so many songs out there.
yeah.
How could they hear your music outside of Spotify, Apple Tunes, and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah. Yeah, it's all out there on Spotify and all the music services. But I have a website, mikeechlin.com. That's MikeECHLIN.com. And there's some unreleased songs on there. And then there's a contact form there that you can just send me a message if you want to work together on something, collab on something. Um, and I'm on Twitter too. I'm pretty active on Twitter, M Ecklin. And I mean, those are the big places.
Awesome.
It's the main spot.
Awesome. Dude, thank you so much for giving up so much of your time. This was a real treat for
No, thank
me.
you.
And I
Yeah, I
just
appreciate it. I'm very, I love it. Thank you so much for doing this.
no problem, Mike. All right. You have a great evening. Okay. Tell Diane I said hi.
I will.
All right. All right. Bye
Thanks.
bye.